start from the premise that government should never take a dollar from a free citizen without an essential reason for it. I play a game. I like to visit schools all the time. In a high school or even a college Q&A session, I'll play this little game where I go around and I say, anybody got a dollar bill? And some kid will produce it. I can grab it, thank you, and I stuff it in my pocket. And keep walking, keep talking, and the class titters and giggles, and finally, I say, what? The dollar. I said, well, I want you to notice something. When I took Michael's dollar a minute ago, I made him that much less free. If he still had that dollar, he could decide what to do with it. Now I've got it, and I'm going to decide. Now sometimes we have to do that, but we should never do that through the coercion of taxation unless we have a necessary public purpose for it. I generally give the dollar back. No, I give the dollar back, but as I do, I can tell that class has probably never heard this kind of conversation before. We have been reducing the outlays in state government the traditional way. We passed tight budgets, tightest one in 55 years in the case of our very first one. And we've had the kind of results that Darrell mentioned. We're rather proud of that. We do have the fewest state employees per capita in America now. We have the payroll. Someone just figured this out the other day. Payroll plus benefits. Forget inflation, not unadjusted. For Indiana state government is lower now than it was when we got there 7 years ago. I feel I can now say with some authority to people, you'd be amazed how much government you'll never miss. People are always, act like this is some mysterious process. It really isn't. I mean, Monday Night Football years and years ago, the subject, they were talking about Bill Walsh, the legendary coach of the San Francisco 49ers, won all those Super Bowls with Montana and those guys, and somebody says, he's a genius. A genius. And Joe Theismann, who's the color guy, says, now wait a minute. He says, this is football. There's no geniuses in football. He says, a genius is someone like Norman Einstein. Well, it didn't take a genius to do many of the things we did. There's 1,000 examples. The one that people seem to love to retell is perfectly true. I noticed that we had an astonishing number of vehicles. We had like one vehicle for every 2.8 state employees or something like that. And so we went to work right away. I remember a few months in, I went over and played amateur auctioneer. We auctioned off the 1,000th surplus vehicle we got rid of and so forth. But it's absolutely true that some of our young guys, I created a team of young guys and sicked them on the whole thing, a project of finding excesses and inefficiencies anywhere in state government. And they went through the garage and put pennies on the tires, on the rear tires of every car. They came back a month later. If penny's still there, we took the keys. It doesn't take a genius. But I want to make the following point, and I think it's one that sometimes gets overlooked by people who would agree with everything I've said up to this point. Our point of view is that having scrupulously and continually scrutinize what government is doing to make sure it's essential, we feel an equally solemn duty to do those necessary things as well as possible. And sometimes I think this gets glossed over. Some people are gung-ho to make government more limited, more power to them. But those things that are essential to do, those same citizens who deserve to keep every dollar we can leave with them, deserve that we spend the dollars we do take with exquisite care. And so we work really hard on this. We measure everything. We shifted government immediately. I struck down a collective bargaining agreement on my first day on the job. It was 160 pages. I was able to do it because it only existed by virtue of 3 governors' executive orders for 16 years. And it enabled us to go to town immediately, consolidating agencies, consolidating procurement, privatizing those things that we could find. I always say, if you can find it in the yellow pages, maybe government shouldn't be doing it itself. How about we hire Hoosiers who do it all day, every day? They might be good at it. But we measure everything. We use the old maxim I used in business: if you're not keeping score, you're just practicing. And as part of freeing Indiana state government from this old agreement, we shifted to a pay-for-performance system. Now, this will really strike you as an act of genius, but in our government now, for the last 6 years, if you do really well, something good will happen to you. If you do poorly, you won't get a raise. You'll get a probationary period, chance to do better, but just once. As opposed to the old system, which prevails in most places still, in which the very best worker, and there are plenty of them, the most diligent and talented worker in a department at the end of the year doesn't get treated any different than the guy sitting around reading the sports page. So we have worked very hard to persuade our citizens, whether it's getting them in and out of the license branch in less than 10 minutes. We measure that, by the way. Everybody likes to talk about our license branches. I'll spend a minute on this. I used to, believe me, they were as big a joke at the beginning. I don't know, does everybody in Oklahoma love their license branches? I've never been to a state where they did. That's the usual reaction. No, I used to say back then that people would go to an Indiana license branch with a sack lunch and a copy of War and Peace and hope not to finish both, before someone noticed they were there. But here's what happens today. If you have to go at all, and you probably don't, 2/3 of all transactions we have invested a lot can now be handled on the internet or through the mail. It's because we don't think a free citizen should have to take their time to go get their government's permission to drive a car. Unless... But if you choose to go, or maybe it's a more complex transaction, then there are millions of people not standing in line ahead of you. That was one of the fundamental. This was really a business transformation as much as a governmental reform. When you get there, there'll be a greeter, like Walmart maybe, and hello, Mr. Brown. What brings you today? Well, I need a commercial driver's license. Oh, you want to see Michael on line 3? Let me take you right over. When Michael finishes your transaction, the receipt you get will show what you paid, and it will show the minutes and seconds you've been in the branch, because we're keeping track of everyone every day. Branch manager and all the people, the times are good, customer satisfaction's high, and the cash discrepancies are low, they're going to get paid more, and vice versa. Very mysterious, isn't it? Only in government. On the first day of this trip, I got one of the most interesting, most uplifting pieces of information I'm ever going to get in this job. There's a great operation, sort of a counterpart to OCPA, called the Manhattan Institute. They do wonderful work based in Manhattan. And they had just commissioned a survey of states across the country. Not every one, but apparently a large number and a cross-section. And one of the main things they wanted to know was, do you believe your state government is effective or ineffective or terrible? And to my delight, they told me that the number one state by a mile rating their government as effective was Indiana. At 77% of my employers said... So let me tell you why I'm taking your time with this. I've already said one reason is because we think the duty to deliver excellent government or competent government is equal to the duty not to deliver too much government. But there is one other thing. And this I believe is an important thing for Friends of Freedom to think about. One reason I've been so intent on this is because As we bring the next proposal and the next proposal and the next proposal for change in our state, whether it was to cut and cap property taxes, whether it was to do the largest privatization of infrastructure in national history and rebuild all the roads and bridges that we're suffering, whether it was this whole sweeping education reform agenda that we passed this spring, I want them to feel not only that the folks they have hired in government have their interests at heart, but that these ideas we're suggesting might actually make life better, because the last one did and the one before that did. You see what I'm saying? I just submit to you this. There is sometimes a tendency, I know I've occasionally fallen prey to it myself, to let skepticism about big government become contempt for all government. And I think we ought to be careful about that. Skepticism about big government is as American as the coney dog. Contempt for all government could get in the way. We're going to have to make huge changes, certainly as a nation. We're going to have to, in my opinion, elect a new government led by very different people who answer those big questions as people in this room would. We choose to be free citizens. We choose to live our own lives and make our own mistakes. We believe that the private side of life, the private sector, the private world of business and nonprofits and voluntary associations is the heart of society and should not be dominated, but should be enabled by those things we do in government.